This Shabbat is called Shabbat Chazon, traditionally known as the saddest Shabbat of the year, because it is the Shabbat immediately before Tisha B'Av, our day of remembrance for the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem. Tisha B'Av marks the date upon which external forces destroy the temple. But the rabbis, interestingly, do not lay the blame for that catastrophe at the feet of those attackers. Rather, they place the responsibility for that destruction on the Jews themselves, having gradually lost their moral center. And so our mourning on this day, if we observe Tisha B'Av, is not only for the loss of a building or even a land in the Middle East, it is rather for the loss of our true north as a people. The rabbis encourage us to ask ourselves in every age, if the temple falls because of sinat chinam, because of baseless hatred between people, which is the reason they give, if the temple can be seen as some sort of metaphor for the internal strength and purity of us as people, would we today be worthy of a standing temple? Our Haftorah for this week records God saying, in so many words, all your sacrifices, your prayers, your words, they're nothing to me. I want your empathy. I want your conscience. Limdu hetev, dirshu mishpat, ashru chamotz, shiftu yatom, v'rivu almanah, which means learn to do good, devote yourselves to justice, aid the wronged, uphold the rights of the orphan, defend the cause of the widow. This God wants, not more prayer and greater sacrifice. This prophetic imperative to which Reform Judaism has always hearkened and upon which we stand as a movement says, you, humanity, have lost something. And until you find it again, you yourself will be lost. And we, millennia later, are still commanded to read this passage today, tomorrow, as we prepare for the month of Elul and Rosh Hashanah on its heels. This is the beginning of us turning our hearts once again to the holy work at hand, that of teshuvah. Teshuvah, deep soul searching that results in reaching out and returning to our best selves, is challenging in any circumstance. And I believe perhaps even more so in this confusing, connected, and yet disconnected atmosphere in which an Israeli family murdered at their dinner table is somehow considered collateral damage for problematic policy, in which nonviolent immigrant fathers are removed from their dinner tables right here in Memphis this week, in which American heroes who are trans and all LGBTQ individuals are bullied and belittled with shocking cruelty. How do we begin to turn our minds to teshuvah in this kind of noise, in this kind of atmosphere? I'd like to share a mashal, a parable from our tradition that I believe addresses our current struggles, both as Jews preparing for the high holidays and as human beings living in a complicated and anxious moment. And this is that parable. There was once a king who lost a precious stone in his vast palace. To shed light on the dark recesses of the palace chambers, he carried a candle that, when lit, was beautiful and luminous, though it only gave off a small amount of light. He lovingly held the dripping candle and carried it through the halls of the palace, and miraculously its flickering light reflected off the facet of the stone's surface that he sought. And when it did, this reflection caught the king's eye, enabling him to retrieve what he otherwise would not have seen or found. There was once a king who lost a precious stone in his palace. This story seems simple. A guy loses something in the dark, and so he gets a flashlight to find it. But like all good stories, it's more than that. It's about us. And each entity in it represents something much broader than the specific item in this little tale. The king, of course, is us, you and me, always, who are moved to search, like our ancestors of old, for something valuable that has gone missing. What is that stone, that something valuable? At this moment in the year, with Tisha B'Av around the corner and Rosh Hashanah on the horizon, the stone is that moral center we are constantly at risk of losing. that lost sense of holiness in the world. And what is the candle? The candle is the tool we use that helps us keep perspective while looking for something so elusive. It may be prayer and study, or periods of quiet and disconnection. It may be looking into the eyes of someone who is truly hurting, or the eyes of an innocent and optimistic child. It may be entering into relationships with those who are different from us and really listening to them. But whatever the source of that light, the candle is that which creates the glow of hope within us, that the stone is there, somewhere, tucked away, waiting to be found. And why do we need a candle to find this stone? Because the palace, the world we live in, vast it is, and dark and full of shadows. At this moment in our year, our tradition mandates that no matter what our year has been like, no matter the mistakes we've made, no matter the times we've given in to our baser instincts, no matter the moments we let fear and anger serve as our candle rather than the light of God inside us, it's time we return to our righteous work. The story and this season beseech us not to forget this search, to strive not to be distracted by the shadows and twists and turns along the way, and even to summon the courage to wander the hallways of the palace alone from time to time, if we must. I pray that stories such as this can be a candle, elucidating the holy work we have ahead of us this year, the work of centering ourselves morally as our ancestors had to do. I pray that Temple Israel can be a candle, elucidating Jewish tradition, a constant source of strength and wisdom so precious in our lives. And I pray that Judaism, that Jewish tradition, its community, its commitment to righteous struggle, its ancient wisdom and ever-expanding Torah can be a candle in each of our lives that we can cling to as we walk through the dark recesses of the vast palace and look for the reflections of holiness that it is our right and our responsibility to reclaim. That's my prayer for us this Shabbat. Shabbat Shalom.